Hello, Haley here, and I am here with Kimberly Davis for the second in this new series of Holistic Creative Chats, where we're discussing the creative process and healing and whatever might come up. So glad to have you here listening in with us. And thank you for being here, Kimberly.
Thank you for having me, Haley.
Yeah. So Kim, I thought what we would do is just start out by giving you a moment to kind of introduce yourself and maybe tell a little bit about how the creative process or just how art kind of plays a role in your life right now.
Okay. Well, art has been a part of my life for over a decade in terms of working with the creative process and working with women. I own a quilting and knitting shop in central Pennsylvania called Stitch Your Art Out and have for 10 years. So I've been working with the creative process and just helping women find some form of expression for themselves. But in the past, I would say 2 to 3 years, my own creative process has started getting deeper into the actual healing and moving into my heart space. And I'm finding that that is leading me to bring more of that work into my work at the shop with my customers and my students there. I started as a quilter, and that was where I found my creative juice, and kind of morphed into art quilting. And now I would consider myself more of a painter than anything. And that's where the deepest healing that I've encountered has happened, standing in front of paper with a brush in hand.
Beautiful. I can completely relate to that. And for those of you listening, Kim and I are dear friends. So I'm blessed to have her here and to get to share her with you. So as for the healing process, Kim, is that something, as far as being connected to your artwork, is that how you discovered it was purely in your own practice? Or did somebody kind of introduce you into that idea and then you how did that work for you? Because I know that looks different for everyone.
For me, it was really one of those serendipitous moments of my life, which there have been many that have really changed my life in a beautiful new direction. And I just happened to stumble upon Dirty Footprint Studio, Connie Hosvika's blog one day. And as I was reading it, I became hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, she is speaking to me words that I didn't even know that I needed.
Yeah.
And I signed up and I took her big class and took deep, and it was like a whole new world had opened to me at that moment. So it was really just serendipity. I had been playing with paint, but not in this sort of healing way. And once that piece went in, it was just one of those moments when everything just worked.
It all kind of gelled and lined up. My story is very similar in that way. I had left my own art practice for a time, and then when I decided to come back to it, it was really just a matter of maybe weeks even before I kind of found myself on the virtual welcome mat of Dirty Footprint Studio as well.
Yeah.
And what a gift. And she's definitely helped all of us network and connect together. So.
She has. She's amazing, and I'm so grateful for that. Whatever link I found, I can't remember it now. I think I read the whole archives of her blog in a week. So.
I love that. Beautiful. Yeah, that's great. So you're really into the intuitive practice as well, as was Michelle, and you know Michelle. She was our first guest for this series. And I know, like in my own intuitive painting practice, and art journaling as well, there's often like themes that I'll be working with for a time. And sometimes I don't realize it for a little while, and then I'll be like, oh, this is what I'm working with. And so what I'm wondering is, right now, are there any strong themes that are coming up for you in your practice? Or what is showing up for you that you're that's piquing your curiosity, or maybe that you're working with consciously?
The one thing that I'm really working with is this kind of idea of connecting to divine feminine source in myself and as it connects me with other women and connects me with, kind of the openness of the universe. I'm playing a lot with symbols of the feminine and just I'm drawing. That's my practice right now. It's the busiest time of year in the shop, so the idea of getting into my studio and getting the brushes out and cleaning them and cleaning up is just a little much. So my daily practice now is with ink and pen and paper. But I draw women, and I incorporate symbols that mean a lot to me into their bodies and into their faces, and just these kind of limitless possibility women who look like women, but they're coming from my imagination, my core, my heart. And so that's really what I'm playing with right now. And I've actually been kind of toying with how can I bring that into painting, because I find that the ink process is different from painting. It has a different energy and a different feel. So I'm kind of, as spring approaches and we get a little quieter, going to really explore bringing some of those themes into my painting in perhaps a more deliberate method.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
It speaks to me too, and I find this as well, but my art journaling practice really feeds my painting practice, and my painting practice really feeds my art journaling practice, and sometimes I'm more involved with one than the other, for sure. And I love what you said about how, ink has a different energy to it, and just depending on the supplies we choose can take us to, I think, different waters to swim in with our own process. And I know I find like sometimes I'll do an intuitive painting purely in paint, all big broad strokes, really large, and then I'm done, and it's done. Other times I'll do a big painting that same sort of way I start out with it, but for whatever reason, the process is asking me to stay with it longer. Maybe the piece is asking me to stay with it longer. And then I come back into it and do detail work as well. That starts to then mimic kind of that energy I find with like a pen in my smaller journal, for instance. And so I wonder if you find like that correlation too between your journaling practice and your painting.
Yeah, my journaling practice is really one, it's mostly in the evenings, the before bed, brew a cup of tea and sit there. And I find kind of it's with each mark, with each breath, it's like I'm finding the space between the breaths as I make my marks. And so it is that sort of really bringing me center and just kind of grounding me. And I find with paint, it's more of I would say a swooping air-based energy that comes from there. So it's kind of that, I think the two sides play together really well, and, kind of grounding, but also being a conduit for energy to flow.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
It's beautiful. And I love how you touched on the breath piece as well, and I find that to be so pivotal and just a real way that we can embody our practice, whether it's on the page or canvas or what have you. It's pivotal. I find I do a lot of moving past resistance on my exhale. Like when I start to pay attention to that rhythm inside myself, there's real correlation. And then you can play with it too,
Yeah.
Making marks with the inhale and with the exhale or what have you.
And then, I was going to say with resistance, I find when I'm resisting, I'm not breathing really. Yeah. And that's one of my keys. That's, okay, I'm not breathing here. So
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So you breathe back into it and then it becomes easier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's anytime you resist something or anytime that I'm, there's that hard energy, that stuck energy. And when I focus on that and kind of like I'm resisting, then things are hard. But when I kind of like ease and breathe into it, then it just all kind of releases. That resistance that I thought was this immovable block just kind of melts away.
And that sounds so very feminine, so very divinely feminine, like feminine wisdom to me. Yeah. And which so this whole talk is just perfect, and I swear we did not plan it this way, but it is such a beautiful lead-in to what you're offering in Spectrum this year as well, and working with that feminine and those sacred symbols, and Spectrum being about this whole notion of a creative practice being something that we can be embodied with, and embody art. So that was beautiful. So Kim, how do you if you could describe your creative process in a few words or a few sentences, do that for me. How's that look for you right now?
I would say, interesting question. My creative process is probably one of centering myself first kind of bringing, all the scattered bits of energy from the day back in. And then finding that kind of core space, releasing the kind of blocks that I may be holding, and then allowing myself to flow with just the energy as it exists. So I'd say it's center, release, and flow.
Center, release, and flow. I feel a lot of spaciousness just hearing you say that. That's beautiful. I love it. And so, how would you define healing today?
Healing, that's so important to me because I have done an incredible amount of healing in the past couple of years. And I think for me, what I've found is that healing is about integration. It's, when I was in Sedona painting with Connie back this fall, we took a hike and there was this big, beautiful tree that everybody was drawn to. But there was a tree maybe 50 feet away. It was the same big, beautiful tree, but it had lost a large portion of itself. It had suffered a trauma from a storm or just... I felt so drawn to that tree because it had lost part of itself, and you can't deny that part of that tree was missing, but it was healing over. And it was going on. And it just struck me as such a metaphor for my own life that, I've suffered loss and grief. But that's not the only part of my life, that there's great joy and great things to be grateful for. And when I can integrate those things and hold them both, the pain and the joys, the sorrows and the wonders, that's what healing is.
That's so beautiful. Really speaks to me of the resiliency of spirit, and that you connect with it on that level. So thank you for your spending a little time with us today. And,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And if there's anything you wanted to share at the end here, you're more than welcome to do that.
I think the only thing that I could share is it's the kind of thing you have to do. That's what I tell my students all the time, is that it seems really weird. And the other thing I want to say is that the stranger my intuitions are, the stranger my impulses are when I'm painting or creating, the more important they are. And so the more bizarre something seems as I'm painting, like, really? I want to add that there? If I... again, release the resistance and do it, that's when the painting really begins to come to life and tell me things.
That is good. We're going to end there. That's beautiful. Okay. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody, for listening.